Well done. I have something important to tell you. It goes like this.
Hello, this is filmmaker David Lynch. I'm going to be taking you through the magical world of typing. By the time you finish this computer program, you'll be a typing wizard. Let's rock!
Wakey wakey, it's the Game Dungeon. Tonight we have Alan Wake. Now this is a pretty well-known game, but I've had some thoughts on it, plus I realized I don't actually know what happened. It's a mystery game, partially. I've played through it before, and I can't remember the plot, or why you're doing anything that you are. That's unusual for me for a mystery, so I clearly missed something, a lot. Now I should probably start at the beginning, but I kind of want to start before the beginning. Yeah, it's another one of those games. Except I usually only have this problem when it comes to time travel, and this is not a time travel game. At least, I don't think it is? See, I'm not even sure. That's how in the dark I am. Let's go.
Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear.
Well, sometimes.
In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and it's what we'll remember in the end. My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer. I've always had a vivid imagination, but this dream unsettled me. It was wild and dark and weird, even by my standards.
I think mine are higher than yours, Alan.
So yes, it began with a dream. Following a typical nightmare pattern, I was late, desperately trying to reach my destination, a lighthouse, for some urgent reason I couldn't remember.
Isn't that the car from the Evil Dead?
On a coastal road to get there.
Eat shit! Okay, I'll give the game props. If we back up a second, look at that guy's face. That looks exactly like the sort of guy who would stand out in the middle of the road waiting to get hit. Well, the scam backfired this time, buddy.
He was dead. I was convinced they'd put me in jail and I would never see Alice again.
No, okay. The United States is very forgiving towards vehicular manslaughter, let alone an accident where the pedestrian is at fault. We'll come back to this later. Oh, there you go. See? He's gone. No harm, no foul. Okay, so this is the tutorial, and it's a dream, so I guess nothing matters. That's why the guy you hit reappears, teleports to you, then starts telling you how you're not a good writer.
It's not like your stories are any good. Not like they have any artistic merit. You're a lousy writer.
Yeah, this doesn't strike me as that far-fetched a dream for a writer. All your characters telling you your writing sucks. Speaking of writing, this is another game I'm going to take the story challenge on. Meaning I have to try and figure out what the story is without looking up any of it. I've had mixed results attempting that in the past, but I kind of consider it a narrative failure if you can't figure out what a game is about without looking at a wiki online. Now this might be frustrating to people who do know the story, especially since Alan Wake 2 is out now, which for all I know explains everything. But I promise I'll give it my best. I don't think there's much important to the plot going on here though. Some guy's trying to kill me with an axe, then a tornado appears, a bridge collapses, some guy I've never seen before says, "Hey, remember me?"
Mr. Week, it's me. Hey, Stewart, remember?
I get locked in a cabin with a bunch of TVs and lose most of my health. Honestly, yeah, this feels like a dream sequence. A bunch of bad things happen, nothing really makes sense. But then Tyrael from Diablo 2 appears and tells me to step into the light. He's just giving me the tutorial. The core of the game is bad guys infected with the darkness come to kill you, but if you shine a flashlight on them, you burn away their shields. Then you use your gun. This dream ain't big enough for the both of us. Down you go. Now what is the darkness, you may ask? Moving on, the tornado gets worse, we make it to the lighthouse, but the Evil Dead camera was waiting for us. Ah! Alan, wake up!
Baby, just another nightmare. Everything's fine. You dozed off.
Right. Anything
The lip sync isn't very good.
for everyone.
Yeah, Alan looks okay, but I don't think his wife escaped the uncanny valley. Hey, that is the car from the Evil Dead. Well, almost. They changed it a little, probably to avoid Oldsmobile licensing fees, but this isn't a coincidence. Yeah, you have to be careful with dropping references like this, because here's the thing. Spoiler, but from what I remember, the Evil Dead is way more hardcore than anything in Alan Wake. Yeah, it's not like that. So by dropping this reference, the game is raising my expectations to think this is going to be like the Evil Dead, which will be fucking awesome, but since it doesn't hit that hard, it's kind of setting me up for disappointment. The game looks gorgeous, though. Oh look, another one! L. Jenkins! That doesn't even connect to anything in the game, does it? Are they just dropping references because they can? That feels a little kitschy, but whatever. Well, the big reference the game is not hiding from is Twin Peaks. That and Stephen King stories are the pillars of the game, I think. And Twin Peaks works because unlike The Evil Dead, the game does try to keep up with that tone. Sort of. We'll come back to that too.
Do me a favor, Sonny. I could really use a tune right now. Coconut, number 6 in the jukebox. I'd do it myself, but both of my legs have gone to sleep. Bad circulation.
I'm stuck here
Are you
forever.
serious? Favorite tune.
Yeah, hit it.
Coconut.
Hit it more. Just keep hitting it. Hell yeah, hit it. Well, Alan Wake has rented a cabin on the lake, and the owner was supposed to give us the keys, but he's not here. Instead, some ominous lady helps us out. Cool. And on the way out, this is so nitpicky, I may be the only person who noticed this, but the engine has a little bit of a problem with the animation. This is a video cutscene. It's not being rendered in real time. Okay, notice how the camera moves smoothly as they drive over the bridge, but the car is stuttering back and forth a bit. That looks like an engine bug or limitation to me. You would think a car moving in a straight line would be the easiest possible thing to animate, but hey, depending on the engine, crap like this happens, and if you're the animator, you might be helpless to fix it. I just had to point that out because I've totally seen this sort of thing on the Source engine.
Once upon a time, I was a successful writer, but that was a long time ago. I hadn't been able to write a word in 2 years, not since my last book.
Well, that's kind of relative. 2 years could be a long time, or it could be nothing. It depends on what else you've been doing in those 2 years. At the cabin, we learn Alan's wife Alice has a severe fear of the dark. And even though he was trying to keep a low profile, the local radio host broadcast that he's in town.
I know who that famous artist was. It was Alan Wake, wasn't it? He's my favorite writer.
Well, Rose,
I just saw him at the diner. Oh, I am so excited he's here.
Yeah, he was recognized by the radio host on the ferry, and then in town, the waitress is a super fan and salvaged a cardboard cutout of him just by coincidence, not knowing he was coming. I'm not sure what the purpose of this is. It feels a little self-indulgent and not something most people can relate to. Oh no, I'm a famous, wealthy, best-selling author, and everywhere I go, people recognize me and tell me how much they like my work. Life is hard. And uh-oh, to Alice? Alan thought this vacation was just a getaway to clear his mind, but Alice was hoping he could use the calm as inspiration to work on a new novel. No! Shut up!
So now you want to get me committed?
No, it's not like that. That's not... Alan? Alan?
I'm right here!
Just don't! I don't want to hear it. God damn it, Alice!
I didn't come here for your schemes for this haunted cabin.
Damn it!
Yeah. Ah, my knees! Ah.
Alice?
Oh, great, she's screaming. Okay. I'll come take care of the ghost, but I'm still mad. All right, I said I'm coming. Great, she's not even here. But Alan thinks he sees her in the water. Alley-oop. And Alan, wake up! You've been in a car wreck.
Alice?
What? Yeah, okay. Now we have a mystery. This actually makes me feel more validated, since Alan doesn't remember what happened in this game either.
The gas station was my best bet. They'd have a phone I could use. It looked like a long hike through the forest to get there.
What are you talking about? That's like 5 minutes away. Oh, okay. They don't want you going down the embankment. Though I'm pretty sure I could do that. Maybe not. It looked closer than it is. I think you could still climb back up, though. Oops. Oh well, what do I care? I'm a best-selling author. I can get another car. So going back to the argument, I kind of see both sides to this. It's obvious Alan was in the wrong for blowing up at Alice. She was just being nice and trying to help, but maybe she should have known this topic is a sore spot for him also. Like, have you ever been critical of yourself over something you know you need to do and have been over it in your head 100 times? Then someone comes along and says the exact same thing to you like you've never thought of that before and you're ready to lay into them? I feel like that's exactly where Alan was coming from. Oh wait, Tyrael's back.
Hello? Is someone there?
The loose sheets of paper were pages from a manuscript entitled Departure. That was the name I planned to use for the next novel I had never gotten started. I was named the author. I hadn't written it. I couldn't remember writing it.
Wow, that's a good twist. The forest ate his homework. Though I was hoping this would mess with Alan's head more than it does. I mean, if you've had writer's block for 2 years, then bam, you black out and your novel is written and it's good, but you don't remember anything and it's scattered everywhere so you may not get it back again? That could mess with a writer's head so badly. That's exactly the kind of torment I like. But Alan doesn't really react much to it. But back to Alan's fight with his wife, I think the context really depends on what he's been doing for the past 2 years. I mean, why are they having a getaway to remove all distractions now? Wouldn't they have tried that a while ago already? It seems like an obvious thing to try if you're having trouble writing. And it's time for Darkness Infested Guys. The game calls them the Taken.
Premium cabins for rent in Nightfall.
Oh, hell.
Carl Stucky.
Pleased
To meet you. Non-refundable reservation deposit required. Fair and square.
Yeah, they're all kind of like this. They come at you with weapons and spout off random phrases usually related to their occupation. Oh, he's coming for me. A little on the nose, guys.
This. Any second now, and Stucky would be knocking on the door with his axe like Nicholson in The Shining.
Oh, come on. You either know that scene or you don't. How patronizing is it to the player to spell it out and kill what little subtlety you have left? You know, it's worth mentioning this originally started out as an Xbox 360 exclusive. Wait, no, that's not true. It originally released as an Xbox 360 exclusive. And if you look at stereotypes for the average Xbox player in 2010, maybe that's what they were aiming for. Anyway, now we have a gun, so you point your flashlight on them and then shoot them. And that's 90% of the game maybe, something like that. They often say crazy crap and it's hard to make out.
It's rabbit season.
I normally don't like to play with subtitles on, but I think they expect you to for this part. I don't know if the effect is intended to be scary or a little funny, but I know what it reminds me of. In Postal 2 Apocalypse Weekend, at one point you're trying to order food, except the clerks have been infected and are turning into zombies with Tourette's syndrome.
I guess I'll have a number 2.
I suppose you want to goddamn largify that too, don't you, stupid fuck?
No, I get it. Your beef comes from England.
I will eat your fucking brain!
Oh shit, mad cow Tourette's zombies.
That feels awfully similar to the Taken.
The staircase was broken. I had to make my way up some other way.
Are you kidding me? Oh yeah, that's so hard. There's no way to get up there. What can we do? Look, I know finding poor excuses for invisible walls in games is nothing new, but the game usually doesn't call out the insurmountable barrier that you could climb up if you could do one pull-up. Yeah, in fact, let's talk about that. Okay, this is presented as a survival horror game. Now, I'm from the old Resident Evil school of thought on that, where survival is not easy. In old Resident Evil games, you are not given enough ammunition to deal with every situation, and melee combat sucks. You should run away whenever possible and save your bullets for when you have no other choice. So when I first played Alan Wake, that was the approach I took. That maximizes my chances, right? Wrong. I was having enough trouble trying to avoid them earlier, but around here, it's like I hit a wall. I just can't make it up this hill trying to dodge them. My stamina runs out, then they catch up to me. After your stamina drains, you can still do this slow motion dodge move, but it's not that helpful. The game is making it clear this is non-negotiable. It doesn't want you running from enemies. It wants you gunning them all down. I think that makes it less scary, but they are giving me the bullets. Actually, I found out much later there is a way to sort of handle this without firing a shot, but it's awkward. It's kind of similar to how I handle mean dogs I encounter in reality. Anyway, I think we have a clue.
The weather is absolutely still. The sky is crystal clear. It's like the forest is quietly breathing along with you.
Okay, so the nearby radio host is saying the night is crystal clear, but I may as well be inside a cloud. The game is going out of its way to call attention to this. So what's going on? Well, the atmosphere is very good wandering around the woods at night, even though it's not that scary since everything is pretty well lit and I have a gun. Again, the whole thing is gorgeous. You can really feel this was state of the art for 2010. Well, no, excuse me, this was state of the art for every game that wasn't Crysis. I guess Heavy Rain came out in 2010 too. That one was pretty bleeding edge graphically for the time. Anyway, the graphics and art direction are still really good. Though this is in the forest at night with lots of mist. So fingers crossed this doesn't turn into pixelated mush on YouTube, but it might. Okay, another thermos. Yeah, I've been finding these, but I don't know what they're for. I looked this up since I don't think this is going to give away the story, and yeah, they don't do anything. If you collect all the thermoses, then you get an achievement saying you collected all the thermoses. That's it. All I can say is some people play games for different reasons than I do. Adding to the atmosphere is periodically you can find a TV playing Night Springs. These are basically Twilight Zone episodes with no budget condensed into about 3 minutes. They're honestly pretty good. Now I thought maybe they're meant to be metaphors for what's happening in the game. I'm pretty sure one of them is. But others might just be fun extra ideas they had. For example, this one is about the concept of multiverses essentially, where there are variations of reality where we made different decisions or changes than the ones we did. To prove he's mastered this timeline, he holds a gun up to his head and it won't fire. The first time anyway. Speaking of guns, I now have a shotgun, a flare gun, and look at this! An entire chest full of revolver rounds! The flare gun doesn't even just burn their shields, it eliminates them in a radius. I feel like this is making the game less scary. See, this makes me question what kind of game this is. I'm getting mixed messages. Like with the pattern of the enemies. Usually it seems like 3 or 5 will run at me, I gun them down, then move on to the next area. Repeat. But then if I try to explore a little bit, they just spawn in. The longer I looked around, the more seemed to show up. So I think it might have infinite spawning in spots. I guess to discourage exploration?
The Deer Fest had been 2 weeks away when we arrived. If the day count on the banner was right, I was missing a whole week between the night we got here and now.
Aha! The plot thickens! You know, losing a week of your memory would suck, but if you were really productive during that week, like Alan was, that wouldn't be so bad. It would be kind of neat to figure out what you got up to. I think it depends on how much you trust yourself. You know that movie Limitless, where a guy takes drugs to be super intelligent for a while, but then doesn't remember what he did afterwards? I like how during one hazy sequence of everything he was up to, some guy was obviously pointing a gun at him. I mean, he got past that somehow, which is good, but I'd be worried if my unconscious self was stirring up that much trouble, and people come looking for me later. Speak of the devil, right. Look who it is!
I'll keep outside, there's only darkness. I'll reach her, I'll fix it up. I'll bring her back. The story will come true. If I stop, she's lost.
Okay, so the world is consumed by darkness, but Alan can save the day by riding locked away in a cabin. I don't know. It feels like we might be entering territory where everything is getting made up, so nothing matters. It's the fuzz!
Oh, thank God, Sheriff.
I have a gun. Make my day, Sheriff.
I'm Alan Wake, but listen. I was in a car crash. My wife, Alice, she's missing.
Calm down, Mr. Wake.
We were staying in a cabin on the island, on Cauldron Lake.
There's no island on Cauldron Lake. Not since the big eruption in the 70s.
What?
Please, I can take you there, okay?
You look like you've taken a pretty bad knock to the head. Are you okay?
Well, the sheriff is nice enough to stop by the lake on your way back to prove that you're crazy. And I admit, I like Alan's reaction here. What? Whoa. And that's the end of the episode, even though this game was never sold episodically. And music, which I really don't like, starts playing.
To my room every night.
And I think it stays that way for the duration of the song. Now, I remember people saying there are clues to the game's plot in the music, but I'm not gonna sit here looking at a black screen while I listen to a song I don't like for 3 minutes or whatever they're expecting, and I would be surprised if the average Xbox player in 2010 would either. And immediately following that, we get a previously on Alan Wake, like a TV episode. This is weird since you just played the game. But I guess if you played one episode, then came back 3 months later, then this would be helpful for you. I don't get it, but it's skippable, so no problem. Yet both of these sequences are skippable and don't ruin things, which is a lot more than I can say for the Walking Dead series. Maybe they patched this out by now? But after you finished an episode of The Walking Dead, they would tell you immediately what's coming on in the next episode, and it was unskippable. And they did those constant fades to black, too. Why the hell would you do this if the player is already playing the game and ready to play the next episode? To spoil it for them so there's less surprise? I used to leave the room when these came up in The Walking Dead, just so they wouldn't ruin their own game for me. So thank you, Alan Wake, for not doing that. And since the game's giving me an intermission, I'm using it to check in. I'm gonna try and get to the bottom of what's going on here. Still more questions than answers, but since I literally don't remember what happened, at least this time I'll figure out why. And it's flashback time! It's pretty mundane with tasks like putting on the coffee and examining photos, but you get to see Alan's apartment in New York. Part of me suspects these were unused assets from Max Payne 2, so why not have a flashback in them? Ah! My chair is beating me up! Help! Well, there's not much to this, and oop, there goes the power. Alice is freaking out because she's afraid of the dark, but we knew that, so we're just retreading things. There you go. All better. Back to present day 2010, it's morning at the sheriff's office.
Have you started looking for my wife yet?
Where's my wife?
How did you end up at Stucky's gas station?
I wanted to tell her what had happened last night, but I couldn't. She'd lock me up.
Okay, Alan has more brains than some gaming protagonists I've seen. Good.
Alan, please help me.
Alice?
Stop talking to the law. You'll do exactly what I say if you ever want to see your wife again.
Oh, nice! A ransom call! And he directs us to a drop-off with Alice's driver's license to let us know he's being serious. Well, I guess that's good news that Alice is being held hostage and isn't drowned in the lake, but he says don't go to the police. I think I'd have to hard disagree for 2 reasons. First off, let's hear Alice's voice again.
Alan, please help me.
That sounds suspiciously robotic. There was voice generation software that could do that back in 2010. Forget about today. So we have no proof she's alive. Alan should ask to put her on the phone. Second, and much more suspicious, there's no actual ransom. He didn't say meet him at midnight with $100 grand or $1 million. He just said come meet him in the forest at midnight or she dies. Who the hell kidnaps someone, tells you where to meet them, but has no ransom demands? Psychos, that's who. He's probably thinking, well, I hacked up this guy's wife with an axe. I'll tell him to meet me in the woods at night and I can kill him too. 2 for 1 special. Meanwhile, your publicist calls and is coming to meet you. Sure. Oh, and if you eavesdrop on the radio, the locals are wondering where Stucky is. The sheriff asked about him too last night.
Have you seen Stucky, the guy who owns this place?
Yeah, you remember Stucky. He was ranting same as the other crazies and I had to pump him full of lead. Well, to me, that says 2 things. First, this is all real, or as close as we get in this game. All the Taken are not just in Alan's head. They're real infected people coming to kill him, because he killed Stucky and people are noticing Stucky's missing now. Second, this is really good news for Alan. All those enemies disappearing into sparks when you kill them aren't just to keep the frame rate high. They're also erasing evidence. The police aren't going to be able to prove a damn thing other than Alan fired a gun out in the woods a bunch of times. It's awfully hard to convict someone of murder if you don't have a body. You're just going to have missing people. Lots and lots and lots of missing people. Who's this?
I'm Dr. Emil Hartman. I'd like to invite you to stay at Cauldron Lake Lodge.
Did you talk to my wife?
Where's my wife?
Your situation with her on several occasions.
Did you set something up with her?
I invited her here. My clinic is a place where...
Okay, I take back what I said about Alan being smarter than the average protagonist. And your publicist Barry arrives. Everything at once.
No harm done, Sarah. I'm all right. I don't want to press charges.
That's not how it works. Assault and battery is a crime against the state. However, despite punching someone in front of multiple cops, Alan Wake is a famous celebrity, so he gets to walk out of there no charges. Well, you need a new place to stay since your cabin doesn't exist anymore, and listen to this checking in.
I guess I'm a little worried. We got a bunch of campers out there we haven't heard from. It's not like these people are on a schedule, but with the traps, well, you know.
Oh, a bunch of campers that haven't checked in, huh? Lots of missing people? It's like I said, this isn't just in Alan's head. All right, let's go. Come on, open the door. I can't get out this way. Is there another way out? It says get the keys. I already got the keys, see? Oh my God, is this a bug? Let's try the last checkpoint. It's not far. Yada yada, missing campers. Got the keys. Let's go. Ah, come on. I hate this crap. One more time. I'll just tap it very slightly this time. Yay, all right. Computers. Yeah, I should mention, I didn't even realize there was a remaster of the game, but I'm too cheap to buy it again unless it had a really compelling reason. There's some comparisons out there, and while it does have higher resolution textures, apparently it's missing some other aspects. So yet another side grade release. I don't know, I'm probably in the minority, but unless there are major quality of life features added, I kind of don't see the point of remastering most games past maybe 2004, somewhere around there. Besides, then they would change the scene where Alan is in shock, and that was perfect the first time. Maybe the remaster lets you turn the vignette filter off. That's been bugging me. It's been more obvious in some parts than others, though I have to admit, if you're going to have one, this is kind of where it belongs, in some creepy game at night. Though it's still not that creepy. I mean, it's trying, but something isn't connecting. Like, I'm headed out to the woods to meet the kidnapper and stop by the lodge again, and oops, the owner's dead meat. This should be scarier than it is. I don't know what the problem here is. I guess something with the presentation. Oh, good, another chest full of bullets. Oh, and here's a pro tip. The wet darkness hurts you if you step in it. See? But the dry darkness is fine. Good to know. And I'm trying to make my way through the woods, but I keep losing my stamina. You know, for someone quick to throw hands at a police station, Alan gets winded awfully fast. In fact, that's it. I've had enough of this. Alright, anyone watching who has a medical excuse, you're exempt from this next part. But everyone else, you've been enlisted to take the Alan Wake Fitness Challenge! The way it works is simple. Find a flat stretch of ground, or a hill if you really want to, then take off running. Your goal is to sustain that as long as Alan Wake can before you become too winded and have to stop to catch your breath. But how long is that? Well, let's see. He's going. And 10 seconds. 10 seconds before he becomes too winded to run away. Or maybe 9 in some of my tests. It might depend on the slope. If you can run for longer than 10 seconds, then congratulations. You have passed the Alan Wake Fitness Challenge.
Great work, kiddo. How about you reward yourself with a coffee and a smoke?
And remember, this doesn't have to be your top speed. You can see for yourself how fast Alan is running here. That's a moderately fast run. You know how in Grand Theft Auto, if you pop off some shots, sometimes people will just book it out of there? Yeah, look at that guy. That looks like a man who does not want to die today. That is a full sprint. So yeah, you don't have to go that fast. Just running along. Or if you want to make it more authentic, someone can chase you at night with a hatchet or other cutting device. Would that improve your times? I bet it might. So yeah, I'm sick of this. Alan can't run to save his life. Now you might be saying, well, he's a writer. You can't expect a writer to be in shape necessarily. True, but you know how you can look at some people and tell if they exercise to some degree or not? Well, Alan Wake's body actor is Ilka Villi. And if you look at him, I bet he could run longer than 10 seconds. I think the problem here is we have the wrong writer. Instead of Alan Wake, one person who comes to mind is George R.R. Martin. He's overweight, in his 70s, and I think he could do almost everything Alan Wake does. And it would increase the immersion for me significantly. Especially since in 2010 he would have been in his 60s. Even better. So George R.R. Martin can't run for more than 10 seconds without getting winded? Sure, I can believe that. He can't climb up these broken steps here? Of course, I wouldn't expect him to. But I bet he could walk casually through the forest, point a flashlight at people, and fill them full of lead. He might be able to crawl up small ledges or walk across a log. That's my problem. Not that I have this stamina limitation, but that I keep expecting better. Alan Wake is acting like a fat old man who doesn't exercise. Okay, he does do that high dive into the lake. I wouldn't expect George to do that, but we still need some more balance. Well, we make it to the kidnapper. He's just some yokel, but it turns out he's been fighting for his life too. This is a really crappy meeting spot for a handoff. So you have to work with him to defend yourself against the Fallen, and you lose your gun during the cutscene, which is probably necessary, since I don't see why Alan wouldn't shoot him given his temperament. And I feel like I was both right and wrong about contacting the cops over the kidnapping. This is not some professional crew taking Alice, it's just some hick. The local police could have tracked him back to his place and busted him easily, especially if they put a wire on Alan for this meet. That said, that wouldn't have worked, because the Taken would have swarmed everyone and no doubt killed all the cops. So this is going to turn out the same either way. And this escalates, turning the game into a wave shooter. Yeah, I don't know. Where's my wife?
Where's my wife?
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah, you're the kidnapper, dumbass!
What the hell are you talking about? Where's Alice?
I want the entire manuscript, or she's gonna suffer bad.
You touch her.
Yeah, you really need to build up your stamina if you're gonna keep punching people, Alan. Your fists are gonna write checks you can't cash. And he gets away. So he wants the manuscript. Well, that's a problem since we only have pieces of it scattered around the forest. So Alan can't deliver on this even if he wants to. He really needs to get the cops involved. Another clue!
I had heard the plane fall. It made no sense. It was clear that it had just fallen here. It was very old and obviously hadn't flown in decades.
Okay, we're adding a lot of twists here. I hope we're not entering Lost territory. And another clue. The darkness wears her face. Well, that has to be the ominous lady. Okay, so she's just a manifestation of the darkness. That doesn't really answer what the darkness is, though. And the driving sequence. Okay, backing up to Alan's imaginary vehicular manslaughter problem. First off, if he was willing to commit some crimes, you might think he could just take the body out of the road, take the car to a repair shop, and say he hit a deer. Well, that sounds risky to me because someone will find the body later, and if the police are diligent, they'll do an investigation to see if anyone did have any fender damage, then ta-da, your name comes up. You could end up as a prime suspect. Now, the better illegal way is that Alan was on an isolated road with no witnesses. So he could take the body, put it in the trunk, go bury it in the woods later, wash out the trunk, then take it to a repair shop and say he hit a deer. And now he has no suspicion on him. But here's the thing. He doesn't even need to break the law. The US legal system is so forgiving about this sort of thing. Like a driver driving into a sidewalk into a crowd of pedestrians, including a lady in a wheelchair. No charges. Or running a red light, then driving onto the sidewalk and running someone over. No charges. Or a garbage truck yielding the right of way to a pedestrian, then getting impatient and running them over anyway, then fleeing the scene. And this one was caught on video too. You guessed it, no charges. Even driving with a suspended license, speeding, and driving on the sidewalk, running someone over. Okay, well that one had no charges at first. Later there were charges, but no jail time. This sort of thing happens a lot. I mean, yeah, those are anecdotes, but there's been some statistical analysis that it's absolutely a trend. So even if Alan was a nobody and in the wrong with his driving, I'd say his odds are more than good for him walking from hitting a pedestrian. But compound that with him not being at fault and being a famous celebrity, forget about it. He punched a doctor in front of multiple cops and walked out. Alan can run over anyone he wants to on an isolated road and not face any consequences. So that's one fear he can put to rest. A boss battle with a bunch of crows is not. The crows are pretty annoying. It was way more fun shooting people in the woods. Well, morning comes, and Alan thinks since he doesn't have all the pages, he'll just write some new ones. Good reasoning. Okay, time to write. Time to write. Ah! My eyes! It hurts! Make it stop! Ah! Being a writer's hard. Well, never fear. Rose from the diner, remember the superfan? She calls Barry and says she has the missing pages and is not on drugs at all.
I found Mr. Wake's pages.
Oh. Yep, the darkness has her too. And another end of the episode. Now this time I do like the song they have here, but again, I'm not gonna sit and stare at a title slide just to hear it. Well, let's go to the trailer park. And now we're back to Twin Peaks, and honestly, this is what I wanted more of. Talking to the locals, taking in the atmosphere during the day, building our mystery. And you can tell the game is expecting me to use an analog stick here following along. But it's short-lived. As we say hi to Rose, she confesses she was bluffing about the pages, and whoops, the coffee was drugged. Night, Barry.
Barry!
And it's night again. Okay. It's the fuzz!
Done to that poor girl. This is Agent Nightingale, FBI! Get him up, Hemingway! You're under arrest! You move a muscle, I'll unload right in your goddamn face! Stay right where you are, Spillane!
Wow. Now, I'm not saying cops wouldn't do this necessarily, but that is illegal. Alan is unarmed and not posing immediate danger to anyone. They're not supposed to use deadly force on him.
I'm standing right here, you goddamn maniac!
You can't talk to me like that! I'm the law! Good thing Alan is impulsive enough to run and keep our story interesting. I wouldn't have run if 5 cops had guns drawn on me. Alan says he's running because he wants to make his rendezvous with our kidnapper. Yeah, you remember him. I'm sure that's going to go well, especially since Alan doesn't have the full manuscript because he was drugged all day. Yeah, the kidnapper gave us a callback earlier and wants the manuscript tomorrow at noon. Alan was actually honest with him and said he didn't have the ending ready and would have to write it. Alan asked for a week, the kidnapper only gave him a day and a half. I mean, really, Alan just needs a typewriter or a computer and printer and he could write something by noon. Hell, I could finish a story by tomorrow. The ransom didn't say that it had to be good, just that it had to be finished. Well, believe it or not, I think Alan may have taken that approach. We'll come back to that. As you can see, there's a manhunt for him. Though I don't know why, especially since Nightingale is FBI. I guess a security cam must have caught him gunning down someone, and then they looked at how many people are missing, and between me and the darkness taking all those other campers, it's probably over 100 dead by now. And they think it's all me. Yeah, I could see local police working with the feds for a spree killer who took out 100 people. Well, that number is about to get higher. Oh! See, that's the nice thing about when sinister forces pursuing you aren't all in your head. Then they become other people's problems too. Hey guys, what's going on? Did you find something? Yeah, sounds like you did. An FBI chopper shooting at me. I'm still unarmed, assholes! Yeah, see, this is above average aggression for law enforcement. This makes me think someone at the FBI needs me to take the fall for something they can't explain, like the Taken. And that all goes smoother if I'm in the morgue than if I can give statements to reporters. Yeah, those birds suck, don't they? I don't like them either. Oh! Oh! Well, now things are nice and quiet. This is seriously gonna bring in the National Guard or something. I counted at least 10 officers killed, 3 squad cars wrecked, and of course the FBI chopper. The thing about killing cops is they just send in more cops. On the plus side, if you live through this is absolutely going to help your book sales, Alan. The radio station! Maybe I can get some help. It's the Fuzz!
Cool your jets, Nightingale. We got him.
No!
What the hell's the matter with you? There's a civilian in there.
I always get my man! I know almost nothing about him, but Agent Nightingale might be my favorite character in this so far. I find as I get older, I dislike passive-aggressive behavior even more, and boy, there is nothing passive about him. He's just there to shoot you in the head. It's too bad we don't get to know more about him. I mean, Nightingale is acting like his wife left him earlier this morning. There's obviously a lot of motivation going on with him, but we have zero context. That's kind of my problem with the game as a whole. For a mystery thriller, we're lucky to get 30 seconds of character development, then bam, it's back to gunning down people in the forest. And the thing is, a game about gunning down people in the forest doesn't need more story than that. But a mystery kind of does. Anyway, back to gunning down people in the forest, you're killing a lot of law enforcement now. Granted, they're only from various sheriff's departments, but I'm not sure what the protocol is if dozens and dozens of law enforcement go missing all at once in a manhunt with lots of gunshots heard. Plus, there was that FBI chopper, so, And the game adds in a new enemy type. Heavy objects possessed by the darkness that fling themselves at you. Gameplay-wise, this is just mildly annoying. But more importantly, I don't find this that scary. I mean, yeah, if a steel beam was headed for my head in reality, that would be scary. But in terms of spookiness, flying objects are kind of bottom tier. That's a different problem I have with the game, is we have all this mystery and intrigue and wandering around the forest at night, and the game's obviously trying to be scary, and maybe I'm just too jaded, but it's largely not. So I'm wondering, why is that? Now my first thought on this was your defenses are too good. You have buckets of ammo, a flashlight, you're ready for whatever comes at you. I mentioned classic Resident Evil earlier. Those are scary, and part of the reason is because you barely have enough ammo. It keeps the tension high. But Alan Wake is clearly an action shooter also. So is that the problem? I think that makes it harder to be scarier, but no, I don't think that's the core problem. Because take Fear, or Doom 3, or playing Marines in some of the Aliens vs. Predator games. Those are games where you have plenty of ammo, good weapons, lots of action, flashlights, and they're all kind of scary. Now, they do rely on some jump scares, but they're still creepy even when they're not doing that. So I'm racking my brain, what's missing from Alan Wake? Well, I don't have the full answer, but I think part of it is the lighting and sound design. The game largely has lighting like it's a bright night with no light pollution, so you can see a lot. Now this looks nice and it's atmospheric, but darker is scarier. And the music, we'll get to that, but it could be scarier too. I unfortunately don't have the answer to what makes the game scary, only clues. But I will show you what I think the scariest part of the game is. You ready? Okay, here it is. I found some supplies, exiting the shack, checking around back. Whoa, there they are. Yeah, see, no music. I was just looking around, then I heard footsteps running up towards me. That was scarier to me than any other scene in this game. Sometimes less is more. You know what would be scary is if you didn't have your gun and if you were walking in the woods and look behind you and in the distance someone starts following you. There's just not enough subtlety here. Anyway, next we have a boss battle with waves of guys and a possessed bulldozer. Then it's day again. Here there are no enemies, it's just driving around and exploring. I actually really enjoyed this as kind of a cooldown from everything earlier. And now's a good time to go back before the beginning. See, Alan Wake was probably my most anticipated game to play of 2005. It was announced for PC and was going to be an open-world mystery horror action-adventure game. Yeah, this video quality is garbage, but you can see you were going to be able to walk and drive all around Bright Falls. I'm not sure what game to even compare the concept to. Maybe LA Noire or Deadly Premonition, where they're open world, but the primary focus is an investigation, with the action trying to complement that, not replace it. But by 2009, Microsoft paid money to stop Alan Wake from being released on Windows and become an Xbox exclusive instead, because that's what they used to do. And then it turned into the game we have now, where it's completely linear and we get 30 seconds of character development for every half an hour of gunning people down. And if we're being real, that might have been the right choice from a business perspective. It's a lot easier to sell players, especially Xbox 360 players, on shooting hundreds of guys running at you than some slow burn grand mystery. This reminds me of a Cracked article I saw before critiquing games, and while some of these I think are overblown, there was one section that always hit home with me. Successfully completing those games required me to kill, about 10 million people. There was a death on screen almost every 5 seconds. Movies structured this way, 2 minutes of plot and 20 minutes of slaughter would be considered grindhouse cheese, direct-to-DVD stuff starring Steven Seagal. Now, I would say that's not a criticism in itself, but it's all about expectations. See, I'm guessing what most Alan Wake players wanted was Twin Peaks, but more sinister and dangerous. Twin Peaks has its own cult following, so I can't speak for everyone, but what I like about it is it has this peaceful, welcoming, and scenic atmosphere in the front, and murder, secrets, and a portal to another dimension in the back. Add great music, petty crime, and just weirdos in general, and it's a great formula. Anyway, the reality is most small towns are incredibly boring, so I wish they would be more like Twin Peaks, where you're on the cusp of another reality with people getting stabbed in the meantime. That's so much more interesting, and I think that's what a lot of people were looking for with Alan Wake. Now, Remedy says they abandoned the open world idea because it made the narrative disjointed and not flow well. That's disappointing, but it makes sense. But then I think they fell back to what they know, which is gunning down dudes over and over again, like in Max Payne. And that works great for Max Payne, because you're expecting a film noir equivalent of a John Woo movie. My problem with Alan Wake is I was hoping for Twin Peaks, but scarier with maybe more action, and instead we got almost nothing but action set in Twin Peaks. It could be I was delusional and Microsoft's involvement didn't matter, and this was always going to happen since that's all Remedy knows, but you never know. Anyway, let's talk about the game on its own terms, like the gameplay. The balance here is odd. I'm playing on normal, and the vast majority of it is pretty easy. Although apparently normal on PC is the same as hard on the Xbox 360. I guess that makes sense. Thumbsticks really can be a handicap. The game absolutely showers you with ammo, batteries, flares, and flashbangs. I am way overstocked for almost every encounter. Also, your health and batteries slowly regenerate up to a point on top of that. And on top of that, the game has significant aim assistance. It almost feels like I entered in cheat codes. There are 1 or 2 spots that are maybe medium hard, but they're not long at all. And in rare instances, like escaping from the police, I barely had enough lights to keep me going. That's the exception to the rule though. 90% or more of the game feels like I could have set up a side business selling surplus supplies. It's really uneven, but maybe the devs knew that, so they skewed it in the right direction. If I have to choose, I'll always favor a game being too easy over too hard, and that's what's happening here. Okay, I looked this part up since I don't think this reveals any of the story. On higher difficulties, all the enemies take more hit points, turning them into bullet sponges. Look, someone made a chart. Now, I'm not a game designer, but bullet sponges are lame. If you're adding bullet sponges to increase the difficulty, that says to me it's just a slapped-on afterthought. It always sucks. Figure out how many hit points you want enemies to have in normal difficulty and stick to it. Increasing the difficulty above normal should never result in more hit points for enemies. It can result in more enemies, or less ammo, or you taking more damage. But bullet sponges suck. They reduce the immersion and make the game more tedious. Hell, maybe I would run from the cops if I knew their bullets were weak and couldn't take me down with one shot, and needed to shoot me at least 4 to 6 times first. Back to the story, you make it to the meeting point, but the kidnapper doesn't show up. Then calls you, what, 8 hours later saying he changed his mind and wants you to hike up a nearby mountain instead? Yeah, because meeting at night worked out so well last time. See, this is so amateur. This guy is begging to have the police involved. So we gun our way through the mining facility, through the mines, hike our way up the mountain. Whoa, 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 whoa. And we finally make it close to the kidnapper, but he starts screaming before we get to him. saying he doesn't have Alice, she's probably drowned. It sounds like he's apologizing to the ominous lady, saying the boss didn't realize who he was messing with. Who's the boss? How would he have Alice's driver's license if he doesn't know where she is? This guy is just no help at all. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Alright, yeah, George R.R. Martin definitely couldn't survive this. Though I don't think Alan can either. Nah, I think that would break his neck. But nothing matters because it's all made up, I guess. Alan, wake up! You're in a mental health asylum lodge. The doctor is trying to convince you everything was all made up and you should really just write more of your manuscript. Why does everyone want this manuscript so much? Okay, time to write, time to write. My hands! It hurts! You know, if Alan's having writer's block, I've heard of a cure for it before. I'm sure it goes back hundreds of years, but I saw it documented in a comic by the Oatmeal. Step 1, hate yourself. Step 2, drink. Step 3, just keep doing that. See, maybe that's the problem. I haven't seen Alan take one drink this whole game. Now, as far as hating himself, it's hard to say. I feel like he's halfway there. He seems to resent his fans and readers, so that's probably a sign he's on the right path. He probably just needs more of a nudge. Well, he finds a gun and flashlight, and wouldn't you know it, the darkness is back to its old tricks. It claims the doctor, then it's just gunning and running for hours again. That takes us through a hedge maze. And I guess this is a cliche, but it's a good one. This is the perfect spot for one of the Taken to burst through the maze with a chainsaw. That doesn't happen, but come on, this would have been the perfect spot for one. Oh, and that reminds me, remember that line at the start?
In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one.
I wanted to come back to that. First off, yes, some mysteries should not be answered. That was my main gripe with Puzzle Agent 2, if you recall. But it's a tricky balance when you try to write a mystery that way, because the mystery by its nature kind of demands answers. So you have to figure out which questions are satisfying to answer and which are not. Puzzle Agent 1 did a fantastic job of that. But back to chainsaws. The opening is implying that it's important for horror to not explain everything because that's what stays with us. Like that's some sort of fact. Well, sometimes. But what about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? There's not a lot of mystery in that movie. It's relatively cut and dried. Some travelers stumble upon some crazy hillbillies and they try to kill them. I mean, yeah, there's some mystery at first and that the travelers don't know what's in store for them. But by the end of the movie, there's no real mystery. The explanation was some crazy hillbillies kill everyone that comes near them. And yet, that does not lessen the impact of the movie at all. Anyway, I'm being nitpicky, but it can bug me sometimes when people make definitive statements like something is the absolute truth. You know, like the very start of this game, when they're only sometimes true. Oh, look, it's Barry. Why not? He rescues you, but he's a crappy driver, so you fall off the road and are in the woods again. Oh, what's this? Another clue!
If I continue like the Dark Presence wants me to, the story I'm writing won't save Alice. It's a horror story, and it's going to kill her, and me, and everybody in this town. No one will survive. Darkness will consume everything. This is what it's wanted all along. I've written myself into the story. I'm now the protagonist. This feels like a terrible risk, but it's the only way to save Alice. I'll be bound by the events of the story just as much as anyone else who's been woven into it. The story must stay true for this to work. There have to be victims along the way, near escapes, cliffhangers. In a horror story, it can't be certain that the hero will succeed or even survive.
Oh, good God, maybe I missed this the first time I played. This clip did more for the plot than maybe the past 2 or 3 hours of the game. Well, that clears some things up. Maybe? Okay, that answers one of my big questions, which is why is the darkness constantly trying to kill Alan when it wants him to write the manuscript? Those seem at odds. I think the answer to that, and maybe many other questions, is because Alan wrote it that way. So he's having some Inception experience by living in his own novel. I think? So wait, does that mean we're on a sub-level of reality inside Alan's story? Or did his story change the current reality? Is any of this real then? I think the darkness kind of has to be, because none of this happens in the first place without some supernatural hijinks going on. Without the darkness, Alan would still be back at his cabin yelling at his wife. But okay, if he had to escape the darkness by writing his way out of it, it begs the question of why didn't he write the darkness suddenly went away and bunnies began hopping around and everyone started giving him high fives? Seems like that would be a lot easier. So what did Alan write? Well, we can find out actually. All those manuscript pages we've been collecting around the forest, you can read them. Now I don't have all of them, but I got most, and I was thinking, oh, maybe the story is a bit like an alternate reality game, where you have to read what Alan wrote to get the full picture. I mentioned before how Rama the game and Rama 2 the book are a little like that. They're very complementary to each other. Nope. There's barely any information here you don't get just from playing the game, and almost every page is just Alan describing exactly what happened, often without any context to the page that came before it. So Alan's story is him writing, and then there was a guy with a chainsaw, and then some pipe flew at me, and then some bulldozer chased me. I mean, sure, Alan gives it some more flair, but this structure is like middle or even elementary school level. It doesn't matter now since it was all a ruse, but Alan could have easily met the kidnapper's deadline earlier and finished the manuscript in time if this is all it was. Hell, I could have written this. And then I went to the gas station. And then I had some beef jerky. And then I drove around looking for buried treasure, but all I found were more batteries. Easy. I could have had that manuscript by tomorrow. I wonder if Alan's other books are written this way. They're crime detective novels about Alex Casey, which is a spoof on Max Payne, best I can tell. And then Alex kicked in the door. And then Alex shot a bunch of bad guys. And then there was a car chase. If so, I might be starting to understand Alan's resentment towards his readers if they're eating that up. Well, we'll come back to the darkness, but first we run to a farm, meet up with Barry, and are on the property of the washed up rockers from earlier, and one of their songs starts playing on stage with fireworks going off. Yeah, see, this is another example of the game sacrificing one mood for another. In a normal action adventure, having some shootout climax while a pseudo rock concert is going on is fine. It's a little goofy, but it can work for that genre. But since this is supposed to be survival horror, the player is supposed to be on edge and scared. Well, this just trivializes the Taken as a threat, making everything look fun and stylish. That's different from comic relief, Barry's comic relief. This is making fun of the threat itself. If you're doing that, what are you supposed to be scared of then? I mean, I guess I wasn't getting scared prior to this, so there's not much loss. But this is putting nails in the coffin for me. Let's talk about the music. The music in Alan Wake is a little complicated. It can be divided into 3 or 4 categories. There were 1 or 2 band tracks created for the game, like the one for this concert, and yeah, it sounds alright. It's the usage I have an issue with, not the song. There's music you hear on the radio, which sounded like some of it was good, but it never stuck around for more than 10 seconds since that would bring the game to a halt otherwise. Same goes for the music at the end of the episodes. You have to stop everything you're doing to listen to it. So if you just play the game normally and not stop and do nothing for 5 minutes when a track is playing, you might be missing half the music in the game. I am. Now both the radio and episode music are record label music, which were on a temporary license. Hence why the game got delisted back in 2017. Though I guess they were able to work out the issues for now and brought most of the music back. I've seen some people say the game has a great soundtrack. They're probably talking about the record label music. I kind of consider that cheating for a soundtrack since that's not composing anything new. It's just a playlist of existing music. Well, on that note, there's also the musical score composed for the game. I guess first the positive. There are a few good themes in here. I like how the menu music starts out mysteriously. The Bright Falls theme is good. The flashback music is good. But a lot of the music is semi-generic. Moreover, let's not forget the game is competing against Twin Peaks here. And no, this doesn't approach Twin Peaks synth symphony quality. You can't expect people not to compare the soundtrack to Twin Peaks when it's dropping so many references. But the bigger problem is the generic-ish music in the woods isn't very scary, which I think undercuts a lot of the fear factor. Plus this theme. You're going to hear this theme over and over and over again. It got to the point where I was considering turning the music off entirely, but I didn't want to miss the original tracks for events later in the game. That's actually a common problem in games, where they compose the music like it's for a movie, but they're games. So by playing the game like a normal person, some music tracks you'll hear once, others you'll hear over 100 times. Or in the case of Alan Wake, half of them you'll only hear the first 10 seconds of. So it's not awful, but I'm not as impressed by the soundtrack as the rest of the internet. I think it's serviceable, but this is a game that called for more. Well, after the concert, Alan and Barry decide that despite killing 100 more locals in the immediate vicinity, it's safe enough to crash at the nearby house. They get drunk first, too.
I'm a writer, goddammit.
Correct.
If I just wanted to, I could write 10 books a year. And they'd be the best books that year.
Hey, there we go. Respect the confidence. It looks like that comic was right. So I guess the trip worked. You solved your writer's block, Alan. And they go to sleep, even though I really can't emphasize how many guys we killed just 10 minutes earlier. But good thing for us, he dreams about the plot and remembers everything that happened. He came out of the water and the darkness halfway infected Alan, leaving him in a trance and telling him to write the manuscript. Best I can tell, the darkness can change reality, but not much on its own. It needs a writer or a creative person to do so. I don't think the darkness actually cares about the story, as long as it ends with the darkness takes over everything. But Alan was in a haze and managed to write the escape for himself with the help of another writer from the 70s, Thomas Zane, that's also trapped in the darkness, but I guess he's okay because he has a diving suit. So he comes in and says, "I've got this, bro." Alan escapes, still in a haze, then gets in the car wreck. Meanwhile, the darkness is so pissed, it drags Zane down and erases the island entirely. Then that brings us to Alan waking up. So a few things going on here. I see why I was confused the first time around. The game is explaining itself, it's just leaving a lot to interpretation. This is answering a lot on my list. So all the locals are trying to kill Alan because Alan wrote it that way to make it more suspenseful, I guess. The darkness doesn't really benefit from killing Alan. It wants to take over the world, and he's the best chance of making that happen. So it's unclear how much agency the darkness has and how much of it is bound to Alan living his own story. It could be the darkness is powerless to impact anything until his story finishes. But the big question is, what is this? Is he inside his novel in a separate reality? Or is this the real world that the darkness and Alan are reshaping? When the island disappeared, nobody had any memory of it. That implies either the darkness erased it from the timeline itself, or we've shifted to an alternate timeline where it does that. This also answers the question of why Alan couldn't just write a nice and happy outcome. He was barely conscious, it sounds like. So this was the best he could come up with. It seems like the darkness needed to infect Alan just a little bit. Too much and Alan becomes a zombie like the others, but not enough and Alan won't cooperate. That makes me wonder if he were to start writing more pages, if he would actively change this reality, or if it needs to be one level up for that to work, and he's trapped in what he already wrote. Now, Alan talks about how the story has to follow a certain flow, but I think that's all in his head. Best I can tell, it only has to follow that flow because he thinks it has to follow that flow. I'm pretty sure he can write whatever he wants, but he doesn't believe that. And I guess we'll never know since Alan keeps having writer's block because he's not drinking. Your sobriety is causing an existential crisis, Alan. And one thing I'm left wondering is how many people in the story even existed 2 weeks ago? Did Alan's writing will them into existence? Or better yet, my first thought was that everyone you encounter before he dives into the lake is real. But since we saw the island disappearing was retroactive, maybe everyone Alan encounters didn't exist until Alan wrote about them. But he sees them before the fact because of how the darkness manipulates time. That would actually be a really clever twist. But it would be so clever that the game shouldn't bury that. That should be front and center if that's where they were going. Plus, you could do way more with that concept if that's what they were going for. Give people a proper head trip. I'm not sure we have any clues as to what this flavor of reality is, or if the game even knows itself or wants that established. So this could be a sub-reality, current reality, alternate reality. I'm not sure there are any wrong answers now. So yeah, you may as well drink, Alan. Hey, look who it is, our favorite, Agent Nightingale. He takes you back to jail. Uh-oh. But then it goes dark and Alan has another headache.
Wake, what's wrong?
Lady, are you stupid? It's a trick. It's an obvious trick.
Okay, I've had enough of this crap. Wake, I'm gonna trust you with this.
You're joking.
Agent Nightingale, your opinion would matter more if you were sober and if I actually believed you were here on official business.
Whoa!
Do it! Just start shooting, Nightingale. Shooting unarmed suspects in a cell will look great on your report. Well, so much for his character. So much for everybody, really. You escape, and the game becomes even easier by having the sheriff help you as an NPC, whom I think is invincible and has unlimited ammo. This leads up to another wave survival segment. Quick, get to the chopper! Off to the power plant! Oh no, they're taking out an RPG! I mean birds! Bail! Bail! Yeah, I think the game has mostly given up on the whole mystery, suspense, and survival horror thing. There's some plot development with the lamp lady being a lover of Zane's from the 70s, but who cares? The time for talking about that was back before it was revealed that all of reality may be an illusion. Alan becomes convinced he needs to head back to the lake to fill it with light, because I guess the sun isn't bright enough. And for some reason, everything past this point starts feeling kind of depressing. In the same way, I don't know why the game isn't that scary. I don't know why the drive up feels depressing, but the rest of the game didn't feel that way. I guess something with the lighting and the framing of all this. According to the manuscript, the darkness has decided Alan is just a liability now and it's better to just kill him. But Alan's the one writing this, so we don't really know what the truth is until departure is over. It gets more and more gamey too, with falling train cars, car jumps, a sort of demolition derby in a junkyard with another bulldozer, and a minecart ride. It ends with you confronting the darkness tornado and shooting it with a flare. Then Alan jumps into the lake again. Sure, why not? From here onward, he kind of enters a dreamlike state with disjointed images that are mostly just recycled assets and blackness swirling around them. And everything still has this depressing vibe. It's really just Alan being disoriented over and over again. He meets his appointed doppelganger, Mr. Scratch, and eventually catches up with the ominous lady and stuffs a light grenade inside her. Well, that looks like it did something, but everything is still dark and tinted. And then he writes an ending where he saves Alice, but at the cost of sacrificing himself to the darkness.
I knew how to write the ending to Departure. There's light and there's darkness. Cause and effect. There's guilt and there's atonement. But the scales always need to balance. Everything has a price. That's where Zane had gone wrong.
Yeah, that's kind of bullshit. Okay, everything needs balance. Fine. Last time I checked, the darkness has already claimed what? 300 people? Maybe more? Seems like that already should more than cover the tab for releasing Alice, but whatever. Alan's hung up on himself, so he has to do the noble sacrifice. Then we get a flyby of the town, reminding me how this all used to be open world, but I can't explore it. And Rose and Nightingale are still infected by the darkness.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
My God, it's full of stars. Then we get the credits and Space Oddity by David Bowie starts playing. That's pretty lame. This started off so much better than it ended. But wait! Once upon a time, when DLC was really taking off, there was a joke that in the future, companies would sell you the game, then sell you the ending as DLC. This was literally a joke. I think there was even a webcomic on it, but I couldn't find it. Yeah, you can see where this is going. I imagine this part is probably Microsoft's influence, but that's not the full ending. Though it's not obvious in the game. After the credits, you're kicked back to the menu, and if you press continue, you just repeat the final segment. You have to go to episodes. Yeah, there we go. The Alan Wake Christmas Special. What to say about the DLC? It's both more creative and more mundane. The concept here is Alan is trapped in the darkness and inside his head. But the also trapped Thomas Zane sends you a busted GPS telling you to follow it, but keeps saying you're going the wrong way. Now seeing what's inside the darkness is a tremendous opportunity for the game to go nuts. And it sort of does in the most pedestrian way possible for this sort of thing. Almost everything is a reused asset from earlier, like you're walking through a remix from the original game. It's just Alan reliving the Taken running at him and hearing his own self-doubts. So if Alan wasn't introspective and ruminating enough already, this throws that all into overdrive. We're not really seeing the darkness. We're looking at a shattered mirror of Alan. I didn't like it. Something about the tone feels more depressing than scary again. I'm here for the frights, mystery, and intrigue, not the depression. The TV face is cool though, I'll give them that. At the end of the first one, you beat the boss, then wake up out of your own mind, but are still stuck in the cabin in the darkness at the bottom of the lake. Then the next DLC acts like the first ending never happened, and you have to break out of your mind again. Like the previous one, it's 90% reused assets with self-reflection and brooding, just with a lot more things floating in space and more platforming than the entire rest of the game. I wouldn't call this an improvement. Then you defeat another boss, wake up in the cabin, again, except this time you're going to write a new novel to make your way out. I guess that's a little better. For all I know, they had a third DLC planned where Alan is trapped in his own head to wake up in the cabin again. That's where it felt like this was going. Not exactly hell, but purgatory for sure. And 2 years later we got, I don't know, I wouldn't call it a full game, more like a standalone DLC. Alan Wake's American Nightmare. I didn't get into this one. First off, the game starts off explaining it's not real, it's just a Twilight Zone episode. Except it kind of is real? The Alan Wake series doesn't like to commit to what's real or not. Also, it's in the damn desert. So that's a huge downgrade compared to Bright Falls for me, but that's my own personal bias.
He is part of a conflict between darkness and light that is both ancient and eternal.
Yeah, see, this is explaining more, and that's not the problem. The problem is the explanation isn't very good. So this is an ancient battle of light versus darkness, yada yada. Yeah, I was kind of afraid this is where things were going. The plot here is you're trying to clean up the mess of your darkness-appointed doppelganger. And this gets me to the core problem, which is the darkness isn't weird or mysterious enough. There's even a page in the manuscript talking about how alien it is. But it's pretty pedestrian, really. Pro tip, if your antagonist is an entity from another dimension, you really can't play that safe. There's a few ways to take it. Get weird, like the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks. Get really weird, like the ending to 2001 or the guy metastasizing in altered states. The message being, this is beyond human comprehension what's going on here. We can only grasp broad strokes. Or the tried and true approach. Just invoke H.P. Lovecraft. You don't have to follow him to a T, but the idea that we're insignificant in the universe and all these freaked out monstrosities is what's closer to reality is always a solid fallback. Inside the darkness, all Alan sees are swirling objects, guys running at him, and his doppelganger telling him how much he sucks. Lame. While the movie had other issues, in The Gorge, when a guy falls into the Forbidden Zone, the first thing that happens is he's almost eaten by this freak carnivorous tree. Now that's a proper greeting for some unknown evil entity, and that one wasn't even from another dimension. If the darkness is as alien as the game claims it is, it needs to friggin' act like it. I can forgive plot holes and lack of narrative if the destination is worth the trip, but I felt let down. And I guess that's Alan Wake, though I know I'm doing myself a disservice having not played the sequel yet. Since for all I know, it fixes everything. Part of me didn't want to before making this though, since I've noticed the phenomena before where when answers come after the fact, people can bandwagon like they knew it all along and effectively erase their memory as to how things went down. Especially since looking at it now, I'm pretty sure there's not one single explanation to Alan Wake. A part of it is meant to be interpretive. This episode actually didn't go down how I thought it would. I thought since I couldn't remember what happened, it was because the story devolved into nonsense and I couldn't understand anything. But no, looking at my list, while I'm not confident of all my answers, I think I mostly figured it out, with some parts being multiple choice. See, I thought the storytelling was going to end up somewhere in between Dark Souls and Lost. What I mean by that is Dark Souls has a story that I would consider not fit for public consumption. It's there exclusively for lore scholars who want to try and figure it out as a giant puzzle, like some sort of cultural anthropologist. Even now, I'm taking it having a story on faith, that the people who do understand it are telling the truth, and there actually is something thought out behind all these seemingly random elements. But on the flip side of that, you have Lost, where it was very cryptic and mysterious, and nothing was really making sense, only to discover by the end that, yeah, the writers had no explanation. They were just making all this up as they went. Oh sure, they tried to pass one off at the end, but it was so obvious they didn't have any answers. There's a whole lot of games out there now that fall somewhere on this spectrum, where you don't know if the writer is being clever and just burying the story, or if they're just faking everything and pretending to have a story, hoping some YouTuber will make up a coherent explanation out of random crap they throw on the screen. And if you're like me, as just a player not wanting to do postgraduate research on what the damn plot is, you can't tell which is which. I was afraid Alan Wake was going to be like that. But no, I think they actually have the right balance of mystery versus explanation that they were aiming for. Where it's coherent enough, but doesn't explain everything. The problem is, it's way too reserved, has an anemic story for being about a writer, isn't that scary, and was built up to be like something that was going to blow your mind, but didn't. Okay, this is gonna sound harsher than how I'm intending it, but I look at Alan Wake, and it makes me think of Duke Nukem Forever. Both games had reveals that blew everyone away, were super ambitious, were in production for years after the fact, and the end results feel like a sampler of the original vision that got scaled down. Now obviously Alan landed on his feet better than Duke, but it still has that feeling of getting duct taped together from pieces of something better. I mean, as an action-adventure game, Alan Wake is relatively solid. It was mostly fun to play, but everything else felt kind of like a bait and switch. I mentioned it earlier, but the real doppelganger of Alan Wake isn't Mr. Scratch. It's Deadly Premonition. If you look at the strengths and weaknesses of Alan Wake, it's almost a complete inverse. Deadly Premonition is way closer to the Twin Peaks experience, but a lot more Japanese. It also desperately needed polish, if not a complete rework of the fundamentals, put the investigation and the story building first, and is just awkward on every level in the best and worst ways.
But how did you know I was FBI?
Easy. None of the police in this town wear cologne.
I think what's going on is there's a certain audience hungry for the Twin Peaks experience, and even flawed executions like this can be rare in gaming, especially in 2010. And to have this level of production value and marketing behind it is almost unheard of. So of course people flock to this. So in the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king. Games going for this kind of small town, surreal mystery horror are few and far between, so we'll take what we can get. And since Alan Wake 2 exists, I guess everyone knows how this turns out except me. I will say based on the events of 1, I'm not sure what to expect, though they better not sweep the impact of all this under the carpet. Alan kills maybe 300 people or more. I'm just guessing, and who knows how many are infected and have gone missing on top of that. The chopper going down and a federal agent gone missing would get some attention from the FBI. Probably the same with dozens of sheriffs and deputies being killed. Well, I say killed, almost everyone goes missing because they all turn into sparks with no trace. So we're gonna have hundreds of people missing all at the same time, including 50 or so cops and Alan Wake. I'd say this is likely to either make people abandon Bright Falls altogether, since it will be considered cursed, or become a tourist trap of sorts, because it's considered cursed. Kind of like what happened to Burkittsville, Maryland after the Blair Witch Project came out. Even though that was just a movie, they got bombarded by sightseekers afterwards. Also, Bright Falls is in Washington, so you're gonna have Bigfoot hunters after all this 100%. The darkness takeover and disappearances might end up being the best thing to ever happen to the Bigfoot industry. Alright, that's the episode. I guess this one wasn't the most fitting for Halloween, but that's kind of the problem, isn't it? Ah well, see ya!
Now, place your left ring finger in the undulating bug next to your keyboard.